Every day, American politics reveals something that seems ripped from a work of fiction, except it's all too real. In the 21st century, a powerful few decide who can and cannot take office after being elected by the people. And the worst part? This all unfolds amid a deafening silence from both the mainstream media and those who claim to defend democracy at all costs. The case of elected Representative Adelita Grijalva in Arizona is a perfect example of how empty the rhetoric of freedom and popular representation becomes when the interests of those in power are at stake. This is not just a partisan dispute. It is a blatant display of political arrogance, where those in power believe they can ignore the votes of hundreds of thousands of citizens simply because they disagree with the outcome. House Speaker Mike Johnson has refused for weeks to swear in the duly elected representative, an act many see as a complete disregard for institutions and the ordinary people who entrusted their future to a candidate. The justification? None that holds up. First, it's blamed on bureaucracy, then it's Congress's tradition. But at its core, what we see is pure political calculation. Arizona Attorney General Kris Mayes, fed up with this charade, has taken the matter to court. She rightly argues that blocking Adelita from taking office denies representation to over 800,000 citizens, a situation reminiscent of taxation without representation, the very principle that sparked the American Revolution. In other words, the same foundation the United States was built on is being violated by those who swear to uphold it. Isn't that a grotesque irony? Meanwhile, the White House pretends not to notice. The federal government, so quick to lecture the world on democracy, remains silent in the face of a brazen assault on the will of the people within its own borders. No firm statements, no serious demands for accountability. Just the same old game of kicking the can down the road, waiting for the public to grow tired and forget. This is how freedom dies. Not with a bang, but with the complicit silence of those in authority. What's most absurd is watching a party that claims to defend the Constitution exploit legal loopholes and customs to undermine that very Constitution. Today, it's a representative being blocked from taking office. Tomorrow, it could be any elected official. And the day after, perhaps the people themselves being barred from choosing their leaders. It's a slow, disguised, but dangerous process, the erosion of institutions from within. This raises a question no one wants to answer. How far does one man's power extend when he believes himself above the law? When the Speaker of the House decides who is worthy of representing the people, the entire system becomes hostage to his whims. And if the federal government, out of convenience, looks the other way, then who is really in charge? The people, or a political elite that answers to no one? Attorney General Mayes' legal action is a warning cry. This isn't about supporting Adelita Grijalva. It's about defending the people's right to choose. When votes no longer matter, the country loses its essence. And the current administration, by allowing this farce to continue, shows how much it prioritizes protecting its allies over safeguarding the democracy it claims to represent. The complicit silence is, in this case, as grave as the violation itself. Beneath the headlines, we see the rise of a dangerous political culture, the idea that rules can be ignored if the outcome is inconvenient. And when this comes from those at the very top of power, it's a red flag for us all. The system meant to protect citizens has become a tool in the hands of those who want to control the game. And the federal government, which should act, watches from the sidelines. Perhaps we're witnessing something bigger than a simple political standoff. Perhaps what's at stake is the future of representation, the value of the vote, and the limits of authority for those who think they're in charge of everything. What's unfolding in the United States is more than just a legal battle. It's a stark portrait of a political system corroded by convenience and manipulation, where the Constitution has become decorative, pretty in words, useless in practice. Adelita Grijalva's case is just the visible symptom of a deeper sickness, a political elite willing to bend the rules, distort the law, as long as it keeps power concentrated in the hands of those who serve the government, not the people. Chris Mayes has made it clear that what's at stake is democracy's most basic principle, the right to representation. Yet Washington's response has been silence, no institutional pressure, no symbolic gestures, no real accountability. The government, which prides itself on protecting democracy and constantly preaches about freedom and equality, shows that these values only matter when they serve its own interests. When the abuse comes from within, when the problem affects allies or political calculations, the silence is absolute. And it's in this kind of a mission that democracies die, slowly, quietly. While the people work, pay taxes, and believe their vote matters, the gears of power turn in another direction, the direction of self-preservation. The government, which should ensure the Constitution is upheld, becomes complicit in its violation because that violation benefits it. Mayes cites the Powell case, a legal precedent reinforcing the obligation to seat those legitimately elected. But in a country that once symbolized freedom, the Constitution seems to have become something open to interpretation based on convenience. If the elected official is from the wrong party, if their presence threatens backroom deals, they're simply sidelined, and the people along with them. It's a direct affront to the idea of a republic, and the federal government, which should be the guardian of the law, stands by impassively, concerned only with the next election and maintaining power. It's telling how the official discourse preaches tolerance and unity, yet in practice, what we see is the imposition of authoritarianism disguised as institutionalism. Today's leaders have learned to dominate without needing tanks in the streets. They control timelines, formalities, calendars, and legal interpretations. It's the dictatorship of process, where nothing happens in the open, but everything is decided in ways the average citizen never notices they're being deceived. Don't think this is an isolated incident. Similar cases are multiplying. Attempts to disqualify state elections, judges interfering with popular vote outcomes, politicians blocked from taking office over bureaucratic questions. The pattern is always the same. When the people choose inconveniently, a technical excuse emerges to nullify the result. And the government feigns neutrality, as if it has no role in it. This is the kind of political cowardice that destroys nations. A government that stays silent in the face of injustice is as guilty as those who commit it. And the current U.S. government, by failing to intervene to uphold the law, demonstrates that its real concern isn't democracy, but control. Control over Congress, over narratives, over the flow of power. The danger is that this becomes the new normal. Today, it's one representative. Tomorrow, it could be dozens. And if the government continues to allow the House to decide who gets seated, we'll be witnessing the birth of a new form of political censorship. Censorship by exclusion. The opposition isn't silenced with threats. They're simply not allowed to exist within the institutions. Mayes warned, if this continues, in a few years, the country will be in the hands of a small group that decides who can participate in the system and who must be excluded. That's called totalitarianism, and the current government, with its convenient omission, is paving the way for it to become reality. What's most concerning is the repeating pattern: interference in elections, attempts to nullify votes, manipulation of norms under the pretext of preserving order. These are the steps that, little by little, turn a democracy into a facade. At the center of this theater is a government that prefers to hide behind prepared speeches rather than face the truth. It is part of the problem. Perhaps this is the great tragedy of modern politics. Seeing leaders who should protect the people become the architects of their own subjugation. The government stays silent, Congress takes advantage, and the citizen foot the bill. It's the portrait of a system that has lost its way and forgotten whom it serves. The case of Adelita Grijalva and Attorney General Chris Mays' stance represents something far greater than a simple partisan dispute. What we see is the reflection of a rotting system, where the powerful treat institutions as personal playthings, and the government, the very entity that should be the guardian of the law, pretends nothing is happening. The Constitution is clear, the rights are evident, but when the will of the people threatens the comfort of those in power, everything becomes relative. And that's where the danger lies. The current government, with its rhetoric of democracy and justice, has become complicit in the authoritarianism it claims to fight. Allowing a House Speaker to arbitrarily decide who can take office is to legitimize the idea that the people's vote is disposable. That is the opposite of democracy. It's the institutionalization of manipulation. It's the transformation of politics into a game where the rules only apply to those at the top. Chris Mays saw what few dare to say. When power starts choosing which laws to obey, democracy no longer exists. And yet, in Washington, silence reigns. No federal leader speaks out, no government representative takes a stand, no agency demands accountability. It's as if everyone knows what's wrong, but is too afraid to act, or worse, has an interest in not acting. And the most serious realization is that this isn't an isolated accident. It's a pattern of behavior. With every election, every dispute, new attempts emerge to delegitimize those who don't fit the political elite's plans. And the government, instead of protecting the vote and popular sovereignty, chooses to hide behind rehearsed speeches about institutional respect. But respect for institutions begins with respect for the citizen. When the government ignores this, it loses all moral authority to call itself democratic. The people are tired of hearing the same speeches repeated while freedom slips away little by little in the fine print of political decisions. And perhaps that's the goal, to exhaust people until they stop resisting. That's how free nations become hostages, not through a military coup, but through a coup of indifference. The government talks about defending the country from external threats, but ignores the internal ones. And no threat is more dangerous than the one that comes from within, dressed in formality, stamped with official seals, and sold as standard procedure. What's happening is an attack on the very foundation of democracy, and the government, with its cowardly omission, is allowing it to flourish. When the Attorney General says that no one is above the Constitution, she's stating the obvious, something that, in normal times, wouldn't need to be said. But these are not normal times. These are times when those who question abuses are labeled extremists, while those who abuse power are protected in the name of political stability. It's a complete inversion of values, and the ordinary citizen who just wants representation ends up being treated as an afterthought. Their vote becomes a bargaining chip, their voice is ignored, and the government, which should be a shield against such abuse, has become the cloak that covers it all. There's no neutrality in the face of injustice. Staying silent is taking a side, and the government has chosen the wrong one. The United States was founded on the promise that no one would be governed without representation. Today, the government betrays that promise before the world. And what does the White House do? It lectures on freedom while turning a blind eye to institutional tyranny within its own borders. It's the portrait of modern hypocrisy, championing democracy when it serves its own agenda and ignoring it when it threatens power. What Chris Mays is trying to do is more than a legal act, it's an act of resistance. It's the cry of someone who still believes the law should apply to everyone, even those in power. But for that cry to echo, the people must wake up. They must realize that every silence from the government is a concession. They must understand that every omission creates space for authoritarianism to grow stronger. And as long as the government keeps pretending neutrality, the truth will be simple and painful. American democracy is being dismantled piece by piece, and the government itself is holding the screwdriver.